The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
You are now tuned in to the PA Power Podcast, College Edition, featuring Mason Beckman and Tristan Warner. PA Power Wrestling. Pennsylvania is wrestling.
Welcome in, wrestling fans. You are now dialed in to the PA Power College Podcast. As Jason Bryant of the Matt Talk Podcast Network said, I'm Tristan Warner, a sniffly Tristan Warner, joined by my main man, Mason Beckman, a.k.a. Beck Diggity. Mason, episode 20. We're in the double digits. I'm going to be doing a lot of sniffling to warn the viewers here, getting that cold here in the dead of winter.
Yeah, we're 20 deep. It's no longer a teenager, so things are going well, man. Trying to stay warm out here. It's just so cold lately. But, weather might be cold. We had a lot of heat over the weekend as far as wrestling goes with Midlands and Scuffle. Things were awesome. I got into some Twitter arguments, but, all in the spirit of good debate, I suppose.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no better place for us to start this episode than talking about Mason getting in a full-blown fight on Twitter with Willie Saylor from Flow Wrestling. So let's keep it PG here, Mason. But why don't you tell the fans what point you guys were arguing about? Because to be honest, I just kind of skimmed through it, saw that you guys were fighting, got a good laugh out of it, but I didn't really study the topic of conversation. So go ahead, Mason, take it away.
Well, it started one place and ended up another. So it started as Willie tweeted about something along the lines of, there's no good time in a match during the season to actually work on stuff because every match counts for seeding. He's like, so you always have to do, basically strictly do what you have to do to win that match, which I completely disagree with. That was not the philosophy that I had as an athlete. That was not the philosophy that I was raised under any. Are we
talking strictly college, or are we talking at any level here?
Well, I think Willie was saying college, but even in college, like when I was so which is why I responded to it when I said I think this is nonsense because the goal isn't about winning matches. The goal is making yourself the best athlete, the best wrestler you can be. And part of that is forcing yourself, like for me. So, part of it's forcing yourself to go in positions, to maybe choose bottom against a guy that is really good on top. Or maybe choose bottom when you're not very good there because it forces growth and you get a real feel for these positions. There's a big difference feeling positions in practice versus feeling positions in live competition. I mean, you and I both know that. And the other thing is there's a lot to be said for the fact that you get used to your practice partners. You get used to their feels, so you have to get used to feels that maybe you don't see in the practice room. For me, AJ Shop was one of the guys that was also a national title contender at the time that I, during my competitive career. And I took down on Shop multiple times when we wrestled during the regular season because I knew that I was going to have to figure that ride out. I knew that I was going to have to figure out how to get out of it. And there's no better way to figure it out than to feel it.
So just to clarify, your point speaks to during strictly the regular season. You're not saying necessarily you're picking bottom on Shop at the NCAA tournament.
No.
And you're also talking about just matches, right? You're not talking about practice. We ain't talking about practice. Gallon Iverson.
That was a great rant. That's one of my all-time favorite press rants, like press conference rants that Allen Iverson went on. But yeah, so I'm talking about matches, man. When you're in a match, and I mean, I'm sure you did it too. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak to how you guys operated at ODU, but we would put, the staff out at Lehigh, they'll regularly put guys in positions that, like my freshman year when I was struggling on bottom, every time, man, we kept taking bottom during the regular season because that's how we knew we were going to figure it out. Just keep putting them there, keep going down. We'll figure it out. And Willie's counter argument was, originally, so you would take a position other than your best, potentially lose the match just because of that. And I went, yes, my thought was absolutely. I 100% would rather put myself in a position to force development and growth than, win a match because I was able to get away with not being great on bottom. Because there are matches that, you get taken down and you're going to need, in the postseason where you get taken down and you need one with 45 seconds left or things of that nature. You know what I mean? So that's my thought process behind it. So then it evolved into a question of, is bottom absolutely always the right choice? And no, it's not always the right choice. If I'm up 6-2, I'm going to the third period, am I still going to take bottom? Yeah, probably, because bottom to me, if your bottom skills are where they should be, it's a clean, easy point. It only takes about 10, 15. I know for me personally, it normally only took me about 10, 15 seconds to clear out. 10, 15 seconds, I'm out. If that long, it takes me 10 seconds to get out, and I'm right back to work. That's an easy point in 10 seconds, then I'm right back to work on my feet. I completely understand why guys, I know Darian did it. You saw it at the Scuffle, because all the flow guys kept tweeting at each other about it, like, oh, look, you just chose neutral. Oh, look, you just chose neutral. It's a situational thing, right? And Willie and I, the argument, the conversation ended in the fundamental thing that we don't agree on is that for me, I know for me personally, and and I feel that if your bottom skills are where they should be as a Division I guy, it's a pretty easy point against the vast majority of guys. Willie's point at the core of it was, there's a lot between riding time and how good some guys are. A lot of guys are on top and 4-point near falls. That it's not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to take bottom. And again, that was the heart of where him and I disagreed. So.
Yeah, we don't want to take too long on this topic, but I'll just play devil's advocate really for the sake of the podcast. But I also do kind of see Willie's point about the whole debate. I personally would probably be one of the people who would not choose a position that I think I need to work on just in the sake of a match. Like, I was trying to do everything I could to try to win. And like you said, Mason, you had a better college career than me, and Lehigh was far better of a team than Old Dominion. So maybe that within right there is a component of why you guys were successful. You do things like that. You make those kind of decisions that, as you said, in a very Miss America type way, foster growth in your wrestling. But for us, it was more like, we need to find ways to sneak wins in here. If we get an opportunity against a top 20 guy, they're not going to necessarily come that often, and I'm not always going to beat this guy, so I need to find a way to win. So, I see the point where if I'm wrestling James Fleming, for example, and I did a couple times in high school, there's not a chance in heck that I'm picking bottom on that guy. And whether I'm going to have to wrestle him in the postseason and figure out how to get out of it, I'll do my adjustments in the practice room as best as I can, but I'm not going to pick bottom on him. I'm going to try to beat him however I can. So to play devil's advocate, I'll at least take that side of the argument. But
no, and I understand that. I just, it was just completely against the thought process that I was raised under and that we had in the Lehigh program. There are very specific exceptions. Like, I think Fleming would be an exception because what he did was just,
which is now illegal. Is that correct? So that makes me feel good.
Yeah. Or like what Seth Gross is doing to people right now. Gross is a guy.
Tech following everybody, basically.
He's been ridiculous. So yeah, I stand by my position, but it's just a difference in thought processes. So anyway, let's go to outstanding wrestlers of the weekend. Tristan, you want to go first?
There were so many guys you could pick from here for different reasons, but I don't know if I have a definitive number one, but one guy I'm definitely going to shout out, and we're going to talk about him more later. And no, he's not a PA native, but he wrestles for a PA school. I'm going to go with Shakur Rashid, Penn State's. Just the mere fact that he's a third string wrestler wrestling at the Southern Scuffle. He not only wins the tournament over his number 2 string and first string guys, but he does something that I'm pretty sure is unprecedented. He pins his quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals opponent in under a minute. So exclamation point on that one, Shakur Rashid.
Yeah, he was ridiculous. All the same way, man. He crossface cradled them all. It was
And you know what? Every kid he wrestled knew that crossface cradle was coming too. That makes it even more impressive.
Oh yeah. Quarter, semis, and finals took a grand total of about 2.5 minutes, which is absurd. My outstanding wrestler, not because of the result, but because of how he looked doing it, would be now. You could say this
Darian Cruz from Lehigh.
Well, I was going to mention more than one person because I was going to say you can easily start.
How many Lehigh guys in the lineup?
Just one. I was going to go with Zane, Nolf, and Darian. So all three for different reasons.
Solid.
Zane and Nolf, just because what they continue to do, it goes so
superhuman.
It goes so unappreciated. The fact that those two pin and tech their way through the scuffle and against really good guys. And what
we just said about Seth Gross at Midlands, same deal.
Yeah, and Gross. Yeah, okay, I'll up it to 4 then, because what those three guys did, Zane and Nolf at Scuffle and Gross at Midlands, people really don't grasp how insane that is. And I truly hate to play the card of if you haven't gone through it, you can't really understand. But this is one of those things when you wrestle, like when you go through Division I wrestling and you understand how hard it is to crack the lineup, how hard it is to crack 500, how hard it is to be a national qualifier and an All-American, and you watch Gross beat the doors off of Brian Lantry, who was an overtime loss away from an All-American last year.
To Scotty Parker, I believe.
Yeah. Completely just pounds them and then pins them all in the first period. That's astronomical. And then Darian's the other guy I wanted to mention because the result, he pounded everybody, but specifically his finals match. If you go watch his finals, he takes Schwarm, the UNI kid. He takes that kid down 5 times, very nearly 6. He was probably about a half a second away from getting the last one. So if you say all 6, right, they were 6 completely different leg attacks. It was ridiculous. It was one of the most impressive things I've seen done from a standpoint of just the variety of ways to score against. And Schwarm's a top 10 kid, I think. Either way, he's a Scuffle finalist, right? So it was an extremely impressive thing that you can score that many ways against a guy that good in that environment too. That so I know I don't have I'm throwing 4 guys out there, but truth be told, I couldn't really. Once you took Rashid, I couldn't really pick one of those 4 guys to go with.
Yep, all those are pretty solid picks. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of those guys. Pretty much any tournament most of the time. So we definitely have a good amount of outstanding wrestlers for the weekend. Did you have any challenge bricks this weekend?
Yeah, so I got a couple. Number one, the out of bounds stalling rule. It's just got to be more consistent, man.
Talking about when they back out of bounds and they step out of bounds.
Yeah, from neutral. No, okay. Actually, number one, it needs to apply on the mat too, because I watched a couple situations where guys on bottom or on top just blatantly, plain as day, flee the mat.
Yeah,
and
from like a mat return position.
Yeah, from like a mat return or a guy's in on a leg or whatever the situation may be.
That's always been fuzzy ever since they've made the rule changes. I feel like it's all in high school too. It's all up to the discretion of the ref. Is he running the guy out? Is he fleeing the mat, or is that an actual mat return, if you will, to kind of jog the guy out of bounds, still on your feet? That really does need to be clarified, I feel like.
I agree. And like I watched a couple where the top guy was rear standing, literally picked the bottom guy up off the mat, walked 3 steps and set him out of bounds. Like that is the Webster's dictionary definition of fleeing the mat.
And some refs will call it and other refs will completely let it go. So it's just very inconsistent.
Yeah, so there just needs to be more consistency. I don't care how it's called as long as it's consistent. Because if there's consistency, guys can wrestle to that. That's the thing. Consistency is what matters. So that was my number one challenge brick. My other one, and this is, I don't know exactly how to word this one, But I'm going to throw a challenge brick. I don't even know how to direct this, but at all of the injuries at Midlands and Scuffle, and you see it every year. And I guess I'm posing more of a question here. Is it because guys go home for a little while and then they come back and wrestle this high level event? Is it just because these tournaments are that good, which obviously is part of it? But you see so many people getting hurt and getting banged up at these events, and it just sucks. I more than anything, I just really, really wish that we didn't have to see that. And obviously, everybody feels that way. You never want to see that. You look at guys like, I know Lehigh had 3 guys default out of the Scuffle because they were all gimping around. Austin DeSanto freaking knocked himself out, that was a freak thing, but still, and you really hope all of those guys get healed up. And Spencer defaults out of Midlands because they didn't think his body was fully in the position to take that grind yet for, finishing third, which is something that isn't of massive importance. I just wish we didn't have to see all these guys gimping around on crutches and all wrapped up in things.
I'm glad you said all those things. That segues to a couple of my challenge bricks, I guess, if I have any. Well, number one, I do want to speak to your point about guys going home for Midlands and stuff like that before Scuffle. That definitely is a factor. I know a couple of times we got to go home for a couple of days before, even the 3 or 4 days that you get to go home for Christmas or whatever, and then you come back to wrestle in those holiday tournaments. You definitely feel off. I mean, remember my first match at Midlands, my 5th year senior year, I was wrestling a freshman from Indiana. He actually still wrestles, I think, 65. Bryce Martin from Indiana. He's a pretty tough kid, but he was a true freshman. He was redshirting. I mean, definitely somebody that I should have beaten pretty easily. And I built up a pretty nice lead, but I mean, I think I gave up 3 takedowns in the 3rd period and just absolutely gassed. And it was like you hit that wall that you feel like you haven't wrestled all summer. And it's like I'd been training nonstop. I was even working out when I was home, but something about going home definitely can throw you off. I know that for a fact. Speaking to the challenge bricks, the injuries is one thing, like you said, but part of my challenge brick also, and I talked about one of my fellow high school coaches about this, is it so much that these guys are getting hurt, or is it more of a precaution? Because the amount of guys medical forfeiting and just injury defaulting out of the tournament, especially once they lose in like the semis or quarters, it seems like every guy that ever gets upset anymore in like a semi or quarter drops down and just forfeits out. Is that all because they're seriously injured, they're tweaked, and they want to precaution it, or is it just throw the towel in and quit because you get upset? That's my one. And then my last thing, it's not really a challenge brick, but I didn't necessarily see the match, so I can't really speak, and I can't fault Spencer. But it's just a head scratcher, I'll say. I was coaching all day at a Chambersburg Trojan Wars tournament in high school, but I was trying to follow it on my on my phone as much as I could on track, and to see Spencer Lee tech All-American Sean Russell and then lose to Ronnie Bresser in the same day. Is that, Mason, is that only me, or are you surprised by that result?
Well, so let's put the officiating at the end of the Lee Bresser match aside, because I do think Spencer got hosed with the way that the ending of that match was called. But so his tech of Russell, it was interesting because he goes out and he 6-point moves him right away, gets him in a fireman's carry kind of deal and gets 2 and 4 out of it, and then transitions right into a tilt. So he's up 10-0, like 45 seconds in, all in one sequence, right? So, he finishes the tech sometime in the 2nd period, I believe. So one is now, I'm not saying the tech of Russell was a fluke by any means. I do think Spencer's better than Russell. The way the flow of that match went, I think maybe if they wrestle again, maybe Spencer doesn't tech him, maybe he beats him 12-4 or something, just because literally 10 points came in this one about 45-second sequence. You know what I mean? And hey, maybe Spencer can do that every time. I don't know. So just because I've thought this through in my head a few different times, because I was confused too. The other thing is Ronnie Bresser is a lot better than people realize, and Bresser is a freak athlete. and presents a lot of problems and a lot of style issues that almost nobody else does. Ronnie Bresser is one of those kids that can kind of physically do things that very few other people can. And because of that, maybe Spencer's never seen somebody like Bresser before. And look, you saw Bresser give Suriano fits in the finals to the point where Suriano won 2-1 on a kick-out stall point that you could argue either way. So, obviously, Bresser is that good. It's a match that came down to the wire. Spencer was on the short end of what I thought was a bad call, or I guess a bad no call. I don't really, after watching the matches and everything, I don't think Spencer wrestled poorly. I just think Ronnie Bresser is very, very good. He's a lot better than a lot of people realize.
Yeah, maybe I should rephrase it. I mean, it's obviously no disrespect to Spencer. He's one of the best wrestlers of all time, in my opinion. But I mean, from what I've seen so far and what trajectory he's going on. But
well, he's one of the best.
I guess,
wrestlers.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, teching Sean Russell in one of your first college tournaments as an All-American, I mean, he's definitely doing well so far. It's not to say that. It's more just, number one, I didn't know that I would ever see him lose. And number two, it's like I said, if he would have gone out and lost to Sean Russell, then losing to Ronnie Bresser is not surprising. But it's like you said, it's probably really a style thing more than anything. But if you go tech Sean Russell, who's an All-American, and then you lose to Ronnie Bresser, who's not, I mean, from someone just looking at that bracket, didn't see the match or whatever, maybe thinking, head scratching.
No, I totally understand that. And that was the exact same reaction I had. Maybe Bresser has made that jump.
He very well may have, especially like you said, the match he gave Suriano. I think his stock has definitely gone through the roof since whenever the last time he competed was. I don't remember if he redshirted last year or not.
Yeah. So, and honestly, I don't know the answer to that either. So, it'll be interesting to see how Bresser's season plays out. And Spencer Lee, just while we're on the topic, is officially coming out of redshirt. He's making his debut. It'll be today. Actually, this podcast comes out Friday. So it'll be today. Spencer Lee's coming out of redshirt, making his debut. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
We were just kind of on this topic about the refereeing. Let's quickly get to one of our listener questions from the week. The man, the myth, the legend, Ron Crossface Frazier. He's been a big time wrestling, Pennsylvania wrestling. I want to say journalist. I know he had a website for a long time. He's up your way, Mason. You could probably speak more than I could. I just know he's a good guy. He's covered wrestling at all levels for a long time since I've been a little kid. And he had a good question about refereeing.
Yeah, he asked have you noticed an increase in questionable calls this season? What can be done to make sure the refs are competent? Grading system by peers, anything like that. And this applies at all levels. So an increase in questionable calls, I don't think it's because of incompetence by officials. I think it's because of the way the rules are written. They're put in some very difficult positions. Now, this is purely at the college level because we're going to get to the high school level. I think we talked about the out-of-bounds stalling, man. They're put in a really hard spot. They're put in a pure judgment zone, and it's just so hard. I think that, frankly, with stalling, I think the out-of-bounds stalling rule, I understand why they do it, and I completely appreciate why they have it. I think they either need to go to make it a rule where it's like a step-out rule, but instead of the first guy that steps out of bounds, it's the last guy that's in gets a point. So you don't lose the out-of-bounds factor with the way college wrestling is out of bounds. All you need is anything breaking the cylinder. It's just the last guy that's inbounds is the one that gets the point. So I think that's one option. Your other option, quite frankly, is to throw out all the contingency stall calls and just call stalling for what it is.
Yeah, but even like that is up for interpretation a lot, I feel like.
Yeah, and the thing of it is that's going to be stalling no matter what by definition. So there's that. The grading system, I think that already exists. I want to say that there's some type of grading system by peers or by coaches. I forget, but I'm like 99% sure. Maybe one of our listeners can tweet at us if they know the answer to this, but I'm almost positive there's a grading system amongst officials after events, and that's how they get recommended to certain events. Like that's how guys get to the NCAA tournament is because they're peer evaluated. You look at a guy like Angel. I know his first name's Angel. I want to say Rivera as his last name, but I could be wrong. But Angel, I personally think is the best official in college wrestling. I'm sure you've seen him if you don't know who I'm talking about, Tristan.
I know exactly who he is. I think he is a good ref, but I will say he's a little slow to count back points. He's a little slow to get in position at times.
That may be true. I've never personally had an axe to grind with Angel. I think there's him.
He's a good guy though, and he does seem like a pretty good ref at times.
Yeah, I know he's the highest.
I don't know that there's any ref. I don't know if there's any ref you can say has never obviously blown some calls or messed up, but no, he probably is one of the better ones.
Yeah. So I think there's already the peer evaluating system. I mean, how to make sure refs are competent? That's a hard. I don't think college refs are incompetent. I would never say that. Now, let's transition this a little bit. High school officials, they're unequivocally, in my opinion, are high school officials that are incompetent for what they're doing, especially because high school guys, like watching the Powerade finals, there were some matches. The Manville Silva match, first of all, both Carson Manville and Joey Silva at different points in that match stalled like crazy, and nobody was called for it. They were both guilty as sin of stalling at different points, and neither were called, which was just mind-blowing. But I mean, I guess it was consistent, but it was still terrible. And then there was a situation where there was this whole big to-do, and a whistle was blown, and Manville, after the whistle, took a couple steps forward and headbutted Silva, and no point was awarded for unnecessary roughness or anything. And the official and there were a bunch of hands to the face from Silva and then returned from Manville. The official let that match get way out of control, which is one of their main duties, to make sure that everything remains, in control, right? That's just sheer incompetence. You cannot allow that to happen. Another one is, we talked about fleeing the mat. I watched a guy in the Powerade finals. One guy's in on a leg. The other kid turns his back and step by step on his hands and knees crawls the whole way out of bounds. If that's not fleeing the mat, I functionally don't understand what is. Like, there's nothing that's more blatant. You know what I mean? And then stalling is just never called. There are just so many situations that I see in high school wrestling.
I took our JV kids we took them up to a tournament in Governor Mifflin a week or two ago, and I had a ref call one of our kids who did a leg cradle. I was so hyped that this kid did a leg cradle at a JV tournament, and as he's starting to take him over, the ref stops the match and calls an illegal move point and said he had what did he say? Figure 4 to the head or scissors to the head or whatever. I was so mad because it was a nice leg cradle. And that is not a move you're going to see at a JV tournament. And not only that, he gives the other kid a point, puts him back to the center, and they start wrestling in the last 8 seconds of the period. And the towel that the table accidentally threw out was just laying on the middle of the mat, and the kids were wrestling and falling over it. Never seen anything like that. So
yeah, I there's just a lot of and look, trust me, I will be the first to admit that I'm not a certified official. I completely understand that it's not as easy as it seems. Just from having, refed a little bit at the Reynolds Youth Tournament every year and stuff like that. It's not as easy as you sit there and think it is. But at what point do we stop saying, "Oh, it's not that easy," and going, "This isn't okay"? I think there are a lot of situations where officials simply don't understand what they're looking at, and that's just not all right.
Yeah, and the last point we wanted to make about the high school is that the new out-of-bounds rules are so up for interpretation, but so unclear also. We've had multiple refs come out and tell us before our matches that they're not even sure how the rules work. I mean, what kind of precedent is that? I mean, what is it? Toes are out of bounds, but knees are inbounds when you're trying to pin somebody or get back points. I mean, I coach high school and I don't even know the rule.
Yeah, it's the dumbest thing. If you're on your knees and you got a guy on it because you can score backs and pin people out of bounds. If you're on your knees, you're in bounds. But if you're on your toes and your knees are not touching, your toes don't count as a supporting point. I'm like, how, in what world does that make sense? So, no. So, anyway, let's get on into the tournaments from the weekend. So, Midlands, give you a quick rundown as far as storylines goes. Franklin Regional, if they had been scored as a team, Franklin Regional alum would have finished like 4th or 5th as a team at Midlands, which is just downright ridiculous. Any high school other than St. Ed's or Blair Academy, I doubt has ever done that. So kudos to Franklin Regional. Spencer Lee made his really main debut. I know he wrestled in an open before this. We talked about it already. So he teched Sean Russell. Controversial semi with Ronnie Bresser, but great showing for Spencer Lee. Then he defaults out because they didn't want to risk his knee, which frankly, with Spencer, I totally understand. Zeke Moisey ended up 4th at that weight. His losses were to Suriano and Sebastian Rivera from Northwestern, who Sebastian Rivera had a great tournament. Kid is really tough. Moisey avenged the loss to Jake Kramacki. A good tournament for Zeke.
Zeke's on his way back up.
Looks like it. Couple of pit red shirts, Mickey Philippi and Nino Bonacorsi both finished 4th. Great showing for both of those guys. Things looking bright for the future of the pit program. Tyler Smith 3rd, Max Murin 5th at 141. Murin competing unattached for Iowa. Great tournament for Smitty. No entry for Brock Zackrell. Just a little minor tweak that they decided to play safe. Anybody that's ever been to Midlands, that tournament just beats you up. So if you go in with a freshly injured, limb, not a good idea.
Not a good idea at all.
So 149, Josh Maruka finishes in the round of 12. Good, not great tournament for him. 157, Justin Staudenmeyer finished 5th, and then the Franklin Regional teammates, Mikey Kemmerer, Josh Shields wrestled in the final with Kemmerer coming out on top. Pretty good match. Kind of seemed like Kemmerer had it under control from the get-go, but both studs, just a wild situation, man. 2 high school teammates I think they graduated the same year. And, they wrestled in the Midlands finals, 2 of the top 5 or 6 guys in America. That's a pretty cool story. Moving up to 65, not PA guys, but worth noting that Alex Marinelli beat Richie Lewis again. Another great match between those two, and then Marinelli ends up winning that. Mikey Labriola finishes 4th. Both losses were to Dylan Liddy of Purdue. I haven't had a chance to watch those matches. I'm going to be interested to see.
I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah, my guess would be the fact that Liddy beat him both times. He must be exposing a hole of Mike's. I don't know what it is. Again, I haven't watched it. Maybe Mikey's not great on the mat as far as on bottom goes. I don't know. But when you lose to a guy twice like that, especially, Mikey's really, really good. And obviously this Purdue guy, very, very good himself, finishes 3rd at Midlands. But I got to believe this kid exposed something that's still a hole for Mikey. So I'm going to be really interested to get to watch those. I just haven't had time.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, I wasn't real familiar with Dylan Liddy. I've heard the name, but I was a little surprised he beat Labs and also that he did so well at Midland. So I wonder if we'll see him crack the top 20 if he's not already in it.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. 97, Frank Mattias finished as a runner-up to Wilkie from Iowa. That's another final that out-of-bounds stalling calls were just strange. And then heavyweight, Jake Gunning, Buffalo wrestler, but Bethlehem Liberty native, he finishes 8th. So pretty good showing for Pennsylvania overall. Spencer Lee, who we've already talked a lot about, he was definitely one of, if not the main storyline. The 2 main storylines, quite frankly, they all centered around Franklin Regional kids. One was Spencer, the other was Kemmerer Shields in the final. Just great showing for Mikey Kemmerer and Josh Shields, and for Spencer Lee. Spencer answered a lot of questions as to where he stacks up. I think he showed he's a top 10 guy, but not in that very top elite tier yet. That would be my judgment based on his result.
I'd say that's fair. We'll see how the rest of the year plays out. I mean, it was probably his third college tournament, maybe. So I mean, he's got a lot of season left to go. Second, well, he's got a lot of season left to go, and like we said, we don't 100% know the status of that knee. It has been since March, obviously March-ish, April. But those ACLs, sometimes those things can take a really long time to heal, and they can take a really long time just to get back to 100% and get back to full go and just him feeling himself again. I mean, he had to probably take 4 months off the mat probably. So, I mean, we're probably not even seeing the best Spencer Lee yet, not to mention he's in the Iowa wrestling room. So I wouldn't get too panicked, PA wrestling fans.
Oh, no, not at all. Spencer will be just fine. He's going to keep getting better. You know, the other, honestly, I mean, as far as things we have, you know, there's nothing we haven't discussed that I think was really that crazy of a result from Midlands. We talked about Sebastian Rivera, had a great tournament, really puts himself in a top 10 conversation. But I don't think there's a ton from Midlands to really dive into unless I'm completely missing something.
There's probably more from Scuffle, especially it being a little bit more centered on closer to the East. I feel like there was more East Coast teams that had more PA kids in it. So without further ado, you want to dive into the Scuffle?
Yeah, so, all right, Southern Scuffle, we'll go from the bottom up weight-wise. We talked about Darian, 5 takedowns, 5 different ways in the finals. Shades of Mario Lemieux, the only guy to ever score 5 goals, 5 different ways in the same game. Happened on New Year's Eve. So a listener question from Julia Salata, you know, asking, Darian's ranked 5th right now, which I'm not even going to dive into my opinion on that. I understand it on one right, but I don't in another, so.
He only has that one loss, right?
Yeah, which isn't even an official loss, but okay, I understand.
The returning national champ dropping down to 5. That's a head scratcher as well.
Yeah, he wasn't.
I'm gonna throw the challenge brick on that one.
He wasn't even ranked 1st in his own weight coming into the season as the defending national champ. But hey, whatever. So the question about where Darian stacks up with Tomasello and Suriano, who, you know, everybody views as the 2 elite guys, I think, especially after the way he looked at the Scuffle. He just embarrassed everybody he wrestled. You know, when you get taken out 5 times with 5 different things, you know, which was pretty much 6 times with 6 different things in the finals of the Southern Scuffle, that sucks. That would be miserable. Darian is 100% firmly in that elite tier, eye to eye with everybody else. Tomasello and Suriano are obviously both there. Tomasello is interesting because he's going to make his season debut, I think, today on Friday. So it'll be interesting to see how he is down at 25 and coming off an injury and all these things. But assuming Nathan Tomasello is the Nathan Tomasello that we've all come to know, Tomasello is a guy that him and Darian have gone back and forth throughout their careers. Darian's always been right there with. So, people are going to point to the Suriano match last year and say Suriano won that match 7-0. Okay, I completely understand that. In December, Darian lost to Ethan Lezak 7 or 8-0 at the Scuffle and beat him in the national finals.
Yeah, and Suriano also lost to Gilman, and Darian Cruz was the one to beat Gilman. So, I mean, yeah, you can't always do the transitive property in wrestling, but, I mean, there's definitely an argument to be made that he's right there. And it's funny that we're talking about Darian Cruz right now as if he's an under-the-radar type guy being ranked 5th in his weight class. This is the returning national champ that we're talking.
That hasn't lost an official match since last Scuffle. So, and here's the thing. Right now, if Darian runs the table the rest of the way out, he's going to be the 1 seed. He's a defending national champ, and if he runs the table, he will be the number 1. So, whatever. That's my answer to that question. I think seems like you and I are in agreement there. Moving on up, 133, Jack Mueller, Wyoming Seminary grad. Pretty much, so he wins 133. He dominates every match that goes a full 7 minutes. He's in a wild semi-final with Austin DeSanto, the third time those guys have wrestled this year. And if you haven't watched it, the boot scoot that Mueller hits in the first period is just disgusting. Oh, is it nice? But they're in the third, and they get into this wild scramble on their feet, where the scramble ends with DeSanto, they're still neutral, as it's called on the map. DeSanto is behind Mueller in a rear standing position, and he lifts and returns him. And Mueller's standing Granby's on the way down. And DeSanto, with all the force coming down, took it all to his head, and I think he knocked himself out. So it's a really unfortunate situation. I really hope Austin DeSanto's okay, that it's not a concussion or a long-term thing. Those head injuries, man, they're scary things. They're not something you can mess with. So really hope he's all right. Mueller, so DeSanto defaults, and Mueller goes into the finals and dominates Gary Wayne Harding from Oklahoma State. Honestly, the most interesting result from 133 was Scotty Parker. He comes in as the number 1 seed, number 2 guy in America, drops a match out of the gate to an Air Force kid that honestly I've never heard of.
That was the round of like 128 or something, 64. It's pretty far back there.
Yeah, I mean, it was round 1, whatever it was. And then he wrestles back, has some good matches in the wrestle back, looked all right. And
won 3 or 4, and then he got picked off in like the Concy quarters, I think it was.
In the round of 12 by Rico Montoya from Northern Colorado, who's good, but he's not
Scotty Parker.
He's not Scotty Parker good. So it'll be interesting to see how Scotty rebounds. And Scotty, it's interesting because Scotty's normally one of those guys. He's kind of a model of consistency. You know exactly where he falls. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. It's a really out of character result for Scotty. I know he was dealing with an injury, so maybe that's still part of it. I'm not trying to make excuses for him. I just don't know. That's a really strange result for Scotty Parker. So we'll see.
Behold this moment, fans, for the first time in wrestling history. Mason Beckman does not know the answer to a Insider Lehigh related question.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. So the other thing on 133, Corey Keener did not have a great showing. So, Penn State, it looks like those first 2 weights going to struggle to score points at the national tournament the way things have looked. I know Keener's a guy that's been banged up a lot, and maybe, I think he's in year 5 or 6 now. Actually, I think it's year 6. Maybe it's just time his body's just wearing out on him, which is really a shame if that's the case. But Penn State, those first couple weights looking like a struggle. 141. I'm not going to dive too much into the Karam Gefeller semi. There was a whole Twitter conversation about that too. Suffice it to say, there was a situation where. So there's two things in this. There's 2 things in this match that bothered me. Number one, they get into a situation where it's blown dead for potentially dangerous because Karam's knee's all torqued up. It gets blown dead, and Gefeller proceeded to continue to pull his foot, turn around, and take Luke's foot to his head. I don't think Caden Gefeller's I think Caden's his first name. I don't think Gefeller is a dirty guy. I have no reason to believe that. I don't necessarily think that he was trying to hurt Luke, but when the whistle blows, stop. And it ends up in Luke getting hurt. Right? He finishes the match and then defaults out. So I struggle with that. And then the other thing, so Luke takes injury time after that situation, right? Then they come back to the middle. The other guy is supposed to have choice after an injury time. The Oklahoma State corner and the officials forget about this. Probably a minute or so goes by. And during this minute, Luke takes Gefeller down and rides him. They go out of bounds, and the side judge, now I don't know if the Oklahoma State corner said anything to anybody. I don't know. But there's a conversation between the officials. They call the whole thing bad time because they forgot to give Gefeller choice. And the kicker is they give Gefeller choice, and he goes, well, yeah, I wanted neutral anyway. And that's one. How does that happen? In the scuffle semis, with guys that are that good, with officials that are supposed to be that good, how do you screw that up?
I mean, that's been a rule for a number of years now, so you should be pretty on top of that, you'd think. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, I was losing my mind. And I will say, I initially thought the Oklahoma State corner, because I watched it, the first time I watched it without sound on. So it was kind of hard for me to tell who said what. I thought the Oklahoma State corner threw the brick on it and was complaining about it. So I got to apologize. I was wrong for that. That's not what happened. It's just infuriating on the officials. Like, come on, man. Just do better. Do better. Just do better.
That'll be the unofficial slogan for episode 20. Do better.
Yeah. So moving on up, 149. Zane is Zane. He just beats the living tar out of everybody. 57 was interesting. Garrett Hammond rises from the dead. He's back in the Drexel lineup. 6th-year senior. He looked good, too. Made the semis. I forget what he ended up placing, but Garrett Hammond looked good. So I think he's going to be a guy that's going to make some noise.
I want to say he got 5th.
Yeah, I was going to say he was 5th or 6th. So Hammond is a guy I think is going to make some serious noise at the national tournament. Then Ian Brown got in there, I think, as a 7th-place finisher for the second time. So, and then Nolf, again, just beat the tar out of everybody. Same old song and dance. You know, the Penn State 5, those 5 national champs, they did not disappoint. All 5 won. All 5 completely dominated. 65, you know, Cenzo actually, crap. I should have said Cenzo was my outstanding wrestler. His first competition back looked awesome. Pounded everybody. You know, what he did to Steyert in the finals, especially so. Steyert, an unattached guy from Northern Iowa who would probably be ranked like 6th or 7th right now if he was in the lineup. Steyert wrestles Chance Marsteller in the semis. And I mean, I definitely thought they should have hit Steyert for stalling. But Steyert scrambles for a takedown, makes it stand up, wins, I think, 3-2. In a match, the Chance was clearly the aggressor, but great match by both guys. Chance ends up 3rd, a really good tournament for Chance, too. Bummed we didn't get to see him and Cenzo, but still a good tournament. But Cenzo just totally dominated Steyert in the finals. Was really, really impressive.
Yeah, and Mason, real quick before we move on from that, it is worth noting, interesting, when I was looking through the bracket, Cenzo did actually have one kind of close match. I think he got taken down 2 or 3 times in his round of 16 or quarterfinal match against a kid from Drexel, who I've honestly never heard of. And I had to do some research on him just to even see who he was, but he ended up finishing 5th or 6th. His name's Ebed Gerald, I think. I'm not even sure who he is. You'd have to look him up on the roster, but basically just speaks as a testament to Drexel and their coaching staff. I mean, I think we're going to try to get Coach Acevedo on here in one of the coming episodes for an interview. But Drexel is slowly working their way into a consistent, you know, maybe top 25 team now. And this Ebed Gerald ended up placing 5th or 6th as like a, I think, Rhode Island state champ, like a 4th in New England. Didn't really have a whole lot of high school credentials, but had a 10-7 match with Cenzo and took him down 2 or 3 times from looking at the box score of the match. So shout out to him, whoever he is, and shout out to Drexel.
Yeah, that is an interesting result. I'll have to go back and dig that match up. 174, the finals of which was probably, I mean, it was the premier match of the night. Mark Hall wins. He beats Jordan Cutler of Lehigh in the finals 4-0. A takedown, an escape, and a ride out. The thing that was interesting and honestly disappointing about this match was these two guys are 2 of the scrambliest human beings in all of wrestling. And that match was boring. Now, look, I was the king of the boring match, so I understand that you got to do what you got to do, but I was just really excited to see these two wrestle again after the duel. I thought that the potential for scrambles was awesome. But one of the things that's interesting when you really break these two guys down, they're both phenomenal counter guys. They both have great attacks, but there were 2, I think there were like 2-3 shots taken in the match. Hall took one in the first period that he didn't get. You know, he didn't really penetrate and get into Cutler's leg. Cutler took a high crotch that Hall sat the corner on and scored. And then on top, and Hall was probably on top for 4 minutes of the match, you know, he did a great job of riding, did a great job of following Cutler's hips, but there wasn't a whole lot of action. So it was an impressive showing for Hall to win a controlling 4-0 match. But I think it does go back to that one sequence where Cutler got in deep and Hall's able to scramble out of it and score. If Cutler is able to elevate that shot, I think it's a very different match, right? You would have to think so. So both of their matches have been pretty close. The 4-0 was a lot more controlled than the 3-2. So it'll be interesting to see if those two hit again, which I'm sure they will. They're both sophomores. So 84, Bo Nickel's Bo Nickel. He does Bo Nickel things. He bonus his way through. Beats Drew Foster in the finals. No Ryan Price, still on the mend with that ankle. Nicky Reenan, who's redshirting for North Carolina State, Wyoming Seminary grad. Nicky Reenan takes fourth. We talked about Shakur Rashid. He pinned his last three guys in less than 3 minutes. It was absurd. How the Penn State 197 situation is going, I don't have a clue. It's a great problem to have if you're Kale. I think at this point it's a 2-horse race between Kassar and Rashid. But
3 who are underclassmen too, right?
Kassar certainly is. I don't know about Rashid. So I know Rashid.
Rashid's at least a sophomore or junior.
Rashid for sure was in the lineup my 5th year. I remember him from the duel. I don't know, but good problem to have for Penn State. And then the dark horse of the freaking tournament, Michael Boykin, who's a Coatesville, Pennsylvania native. He's the backup heavyweight for NC State, and NC State's over in Italy. They wrestle Oklahoma State today. Michael Boykin just comes out of the woodwork, beats Nick Nevels, makes the finals, and was super, super close to winning, to taking down Jacob Casper at the very end of regulation. As it turns out, Casper takes him down in overtime, at the buzzer in overtime to win. But Michael Boykin, great tournament for him. Maybe putting himself back in the starting position. I don't know.
Definitely making an argument for it. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to who performs under the lights. So that's a pretty impressive performance for Boykin. He's getting back to showing some flashes of what we saw of him in high school, his senior year at Coatesville.
Yeah, he was a stud.
I want to say he beat Jordan Wood in the state finals one year.
Was that him that did that?
Couple years older. Pretty sure, a couple years older, but
yeah, because Wood lost to Haynes and then somebody else.
I think it was Boykin.
Which, speaking of which, Jordan Wood also placed at the Scuffle, took 8th, had to default out. Did Haynes place? I think so. I should know that. So while I look that up,
I don't remember seeing Haynes' name in the bracket, but he might have.
Let's go. We'll check this out. But we talked about the injury.
Did notice, Mason, we talked about this. I was going to say we talked about how many random, pretty tough Pennsylvania kids got picked off in the first round by Air Force kids. I think we came up with 3 or 4 off the top of our head. Chris Weiler from Lehigh, Scotty Parker, Ronnie Perry from Lock Haven was like a 3 or 4 seed. Air Force showed up in the first round.
Yeah, they did. Unfortunately, 2 of those names are Lehigh guys, so that's not good. It's not good for my own personal taste. But yeah. So anyway, I mean, Air Force they've always got some good guys. They always pull some upsets or have some guys on the podium in March. So not necessarily shocking. Another thing to note, 141, Nick Lee, unattached for Penn State, makes the finals. Pins Josh Alber, who's ranked 7th in America, which, if you haven't watched the Lee-Alber match, go watch it. Insane match, wire-to-wire action. Beautiful inside trip by Nick Lee to pin him. It begs the question with
Did Cortez. Did he get that from Cenzo?
With Cortez's injury and results that aren't maybe where Penn State would hope. Does Nick Lee get pulled?
Both of the Lees get their red shirts pulled this weekend. Spencer and Nick, not related, obviously, but 2 high-profile Lees.
Yeah, Spencer's been confirmed that he's getting pulled today. I don't know about Nick Lee. Time will tell. So, what's this thing about a Penn State potential transfer 25? Do tell.
I don't know for a fact if that's confirmed or if that's even a rumor worth mentioning, but I did see and hear from a forum on one of Penn State's like subscription websites, I guess it was, that there is a rumor that a transfer would be coming into Penn State in the near future for 125 or 133. And when I read the rumor, at least that was on the forum, it said Josh Rodriguez from North Dakota State. Now, I'm pretty sure that he exhausted his eligibility, was an All-American there, but is done wrestling. However, Jose Rodriguez, I think he's from Solon, Ohio, wrestled at Ohio State, was in the NCAA bracket last year at 125 for the Buckeyes.
Yep.
Who did leave the team and I think announced his intention to transfer, but never really wound up anywhere as of yet, at least to my knowledge. He would make a lot more sense to me. So what I gathered from it, putting pieces of the rumor mill together, that's what I gathered. I don't know that there's any truth to that whatsoever, or if I just completely made that up in my own imagination. But from what I read, somebody who seemed to be a reputable source around the Penn State wrestling forum hinted that Jose Rodriguez could be an Nittany Lion. So take that for what it's worth. Who knows?
Okay, 2 reactions. Number 1, I'm disappointed in you that you read forums. Number 2.
I didn't read the forum. Somebody sent the forum to me, knowing that I run this podcast. So it was actually it was like a secondhand information, but it was helpful because I never heard the rumor.
All right, I rescind my statement then. Second thing, if it's Jose Rodriguez, that would be a huge transfer, or pickup or whatever. So that would be pretty enormous. And then I guess if Josh Rodriguez goes into the NLWC, it's kind of neither here nor there. So interesting things happening nonetheless. To
our weekend preview, probably, right?
Yeah, I think
going on, but there's some decent dual meets coming up this weekend.
So Spencer Lee debuts today. Along with his debut is Nathan Tomasello making his debut at 125 against Maryland. Unfortunately, he's not going to wrestle against Rutgers, which sucks. Would have loved to have seen Tomasello and Suriano. I get it.
It's too good to be true, really.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Tomasello, he's still coming off that injury. 25 is a really big cut for him, and et cetera, et cetera. But being selfish as a fan, would have loved to have seen that one. North Dakota
fans are allowed to be selfish. It's all right.
Yeah, well, people do call us the selfish generation, so at this point, let's embrace it. North Dakota State at Pitt on Friday, and then Oklahoma at Pitt on Sunday. So big weekend for the old Panthers. Fitzgerald Fieldhouse going to be the place to be. If you're in the Pittsburgh area, check it out. Show some support. Got the old F&M Franklin and Marshall Open Saturday, a little bit later in the season than it normally is. It's normally right around between. I think it's normally late December, isn't it? Or is it normally this week?
No, it's usually January, first week of January, 4th, 5th, 6th, somewhere in there.
Or I'm thinking of Wilkes.
Yeah, Wilkes is right around Christmas. Franklin and Marshall Open's always a decent open. It draws a lot of. It's kind of like we were talking about a couple of podcasts ago about the Clarion Open. It draws a lot of recent PA high school graduates. So, checking those results, you'll see a lot of familiar names that you saw at Hershey recently. There's a lot of PA schools, whether they're D1 or D2, sending their kids. So you'll see a lot of familiar PA names wrestling in that tournament. And then you've always got Penn State. I remember a couple years ago, I went in the Altons the one year they were redshirting. They were there. So you'll even have your good Penn State and Lehigh, maybe even send some of their backups or redshirts. So
yeah, some of our guys always go. Oh, speaking of a Lehigh backup, a guy I do have to give a shout out to, and this one's legitimate. Dylan Ammerman wrestled Midlands and Scuffle. Came a match away from placing at Midlands, hops on a plane, and then went and wrestled Scuffle. That is awesome.
That is ridiculous.
So shout out to Dylan Ammerman. You keep doing you. I don't know how your body feels. Probably awful, but
probably not good at all.
Other dual meets this weekend, Bloomsburg at Edinburgh Saturday. I don't know if that dual meet's still on because Edinburgh is the complete frozen and buried under snow tundra. But if so, hop on the dog sleds, go check that one out. You might have to race the Iditarod to get there, but it'll be worth watching. Bucknell at Navy Sunday. Jared Prince is up at 49 now. Who's there for? 41 will be, Gill and Smith will be interesting. I think that's one Smitty should definitely win, but it'll be at least an interesting match.
Can never count those Navy kids out, though. Those kids.
I hate wrestling Navy kids.
Always strong, always in good position, always in good shape, never stop.
I remember,
pretty much the exact type of kid that you don't like wrestling.
I remember I was in an open one time. I want to say like Millersville, the old Shorty Hitchcock. And I'm wrestling like this backup Navy kid. And after the first period, I'm winning like 12-0. And it's like, seriously, dude, we're at an open in the middle of January. It's my redshirt year, too. Like, we're at an open in the middle of January. It's 12-0. Just stop.
Just get tech fault.
Like, can we just be done? And he's just, like, clubbing me as hard as he can in the head, right? Which I respect, and which, especially out of one of our service academies, I love, because, those who defend our country, that's the attitude you would want them to have. But at the same time, I'm like, please stop punching me in the head, man. I don't want to, but like, I really don't want to be here. Can we just be done? And like, that is the perfect...
Can we just be friends?
Yeah, like, can we not? So that'll be, I'm sure there will be a lot of fun matches in that duel. Check out 174 because Jadaine Bernstein is liable to toss anybody and everybody on their dome, the Navy guy. He's a really fun guy to watch. Clarion, Columbia, Hofstra, and the Citadel are all in a quad situation up in Brookville, New York on Sunday. So there'll be some good matches in there. Hopefully Brock Zackrell's back. I have no information as to whether he will or will not be. If he is, you could see a Ty Bacaizo Brock Zackrell match when the Citadel and Clarion hit. Bacaizo, a Peters Township native, who actually he gave Sammy Krivas a pretty good match in the Scuffle quarters. Krivas, another guy, had a good showing at the Scuffle. There were just so freaking many of them, it was hard to keep track. And then I guess the last thing we have coming up is Penn wrestles Cal Poly in Stanford in Palo Alto on Sunday. So there will be Penn headed out there to the West Coast. 3 highly intelligent student body schools will be wrestling.
That's right. I guess before we sign off, Mason, I'll just say to our listeners, keep the questions coming. We had some good ones this last week that really drew up some discussion between us. I know that we talked extensively about the refereeing situation and about the guys medical forfeiting out and the injuries. So our listeners and our followers, keep tweeting at us and send us your questions, send us your topics that you want us to talk about so we can find something to blabber about here for our hour 15 that we get you each week.
Yeah. And I mean, I think other than that, thank you guys, everybody that listens. I was actually over the weekend, I was in a bar in Pittsburgh, McFadden's for anybody that knows. And scooting to the bar to get another drink before I go back out on the dance floor. And
classic.
Yes, if you've ever seen me in a social environment, none of this is a surprise. So I'm sliding through, and some guy, once I get to the bar, looks at me and goes, "Are you Mason?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, at this point, I'm like, crap, what did I do to this guy? He goes, "Oh, man, I listened to your podcast." So I was I was like, "Whoa, what's up, man?"
We are getting a ton of random drop-ins of people who claim to listen to the podcast from all over the place. So it's humbling, but it's also interesting to hear what walks of life these people are coming up to us from, telling us that they listen to the podcast. So keep listening if we're not too annoying, and keep sending us your questions and your topics, and we'll find something to jaw about.
Yeah. So I wanted to throw that in there. That was hilarious. It was just a really funny encounter. So having said that, thank you, everybody. Keep it coming. Follow us on the old social media, and Tristan, take us out. That's going to wrap it up for us at the PA Power College Podcast. Thanks again for dialing in.
I'm Tristan Warner. Find me on Twitter at WarnTriz. And as always, you can find Mason Beckman at Beck_Diggity. That's where he will be leading his Twitter rants and arguments. Visit PAPowerWrestling.com for all your wrestling needs, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at PAPowerWrestle, and go ahead and give us a friend on Facebook. Till next time, stay classy, wrestling fans.
Woo!